So, very good morning yet again to those of you who are here live on the Zoom, or good morning, or in fact, you're in different places in the world. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and also to those joining us on YouTube afterwards. And this one, I think, is the fifth in our series. I think I said that last time and it was the fourth. But anyway, we're around that kind of a number. We're getting well on in this series of teachings on voidness of everything and compassion for everyone. So it's about voidness and compassion. And as always, we're studying this in the context of our own journey. I think most people here are on Mahayana path, Bodhisattva path, and so we are committed to something quite wonderful, our own future total awakening, total freedom, so that we can help everybody. And in that context, this perfect union of wisdom and compassion, but for wisdom we mean shunyata, emptiness, voidness. That wisdom is absolutely vital. But because we're on the Bodhisattva path, then always we make a habit of beginning everything well, ending everything well, and doing it well, which means well means supported by bodhicitta. So at the beginning, we open our hearts to the Bodhisattva's motivation. At the end, we share and dedicate. And during the process, we try to remain in a very good mind, peaceful mind, attentive mind, feeling we are really want to learn. Not so much facts, but we want to learn in the sense of to mature as human beings, to grow and become wiser and softer and kinder. So, and the way we do that is, of course, through Dharma. So let's start with our usual prayers. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through our practice of generosity and all six transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality, to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every one of those beings be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for. May they have good friends and find respect, and live in places of peace and plenty. And most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these good circumstances to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural and sacred well-being totally beyond suffering and attain the great equanimity that's free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamavate shameta shatru Om kure marajite karota keyorete jovati olayane Pishudan emale malapanaye kukure kakagrase Grasana omuke paramuke amuke shamadawane Sawa graha bandhanane negretava Sawa bhava pravadina vimukta marapasha Savitva Buddhamudra Anukatita Savamari Butsarita Parishuddhe Biga Shantu Savamarakama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads on lotus and a moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So we are picking up from where we left off. We are going through in this talks, in the first part of this series of talks, we're going through Khenpo Tsultrim Gyamtso's journey through the different stages of shunyata, through working through the main schools. And we got as far as Cittamatra, and today we go on to madhyamaka, middle way. But before we do, I must can you say, reiterate the perspective, because when we look at the different schools, there's no end to it. It's like a microscope. You can go in and see more detail, then you can zoom 1,000 times more, and all the way down to electron microscope. The ideas, the logic, the fine-tuning of the logic, the debate, the texts written by great scholars, and the commentaries on those texts which disagree, and then the commentaries on the commentaries that disagree, it's kind of, too big. And one can get totally lost in ideas, because in the end, it's all ideas. One person's ideas, another person's ideas about what? About the Buddha's intention. This word in Tibetan, gompa, the Buddha's intention, what the Buddha really wanted us to understand. But that word understand doesn't just mean conceptually, it has itself so many depths. What would the Buddha really have liked our mind to awaken to? Because Buddha means awakened, so to wake up to come out of a sleep of ignorance. What would the Buddha really have best wished for us? And so all these great scholars are really trying to untangle it. And as I mentioned last time, when we look through the history of Buddhist thought and philosophy, we are seeing how gradually, in the whole world of Buddhism, there is this waking up of ideas. And it took a long time. It took more than 1,000 years after the Buddha. It gets finer and finer because people, based on what's been said before, then you can take it further. So anyway, we looked at that last time. But the point we need to start with is that although there are these fine differences, there is just so much vital common ground that all Buddhist traditions share. The morality. Nobody's arguing about that. What is virtue, non-virtue, how we need to conduct our lives. It's called right conduct. Conducting, the word sultim in Tibetan, which means right conduct. It means we conduct ourselves according to the codes given to us by the Buddha, code of behavior. So that's the same for all of us. And then the meditation methods. We all need to calm and still this crazy monkey mind. That's the same for everybody. We need shamatha and so on. so much is the same. And then of the wisdom teachings, so much of the worldly wisdom is learning about the workings of karma, about impermanence and so on. That's the same. So what we're looking at, these differences, is just a few percentages of the whole Buddhist story. We mustn't blow it out of proportion. So that's one thing. We must not get lost in academic debating details as though they were that important. So one point I want to make is, in one way they're not that important, and in one way it's the most important. That's a contradiction in what I just said. Now, as scholars of logic, you're going to see, well, how can something be both not very important and the most important? Well, today's topic, the middle way, and once we've got a bit of the middle way understood, the middle way and Cittamatra together, we're going to see that we need, in our journey to enlightenment, to go beyond all ideas. You will never think your way to enlightenment. Not only that, what it, the big deal, what it is, you will never get with this worldly mind. It's like you can't eat a banana with your ear. Don't try it, but an ear cannot eat, right? It can't. It's not capable. It can't chew, it can't digest, it can't get a banana in your body. If you really rammed a banana in your ear, you'd probably destroy your brain or something. The ear cannot eat. Your flow of consciousness, with everything we've studied in the 5 aggregates, the way we think, feel, all mind's consciousness procedures, cannot get it. They will never get it. They're incapable of getting it. So ideas are important, but they're not the be-all and end-all, and it's not by mastering the ideas that you'll get enlightened. So as Dharmacharya says, how many a brilliant scholar has died unenlightened, in their last moments, on their deathbed. They wish they'd practiced more and not thought so much, not studied and argued so much. So from that point of view, it's all ideas, all of what we're studying now. Ideas about, well, we'll come to that in a minute, but ideas. But then in another way, the wisdom that this is leading us to, in which these ideas are vital stepping stones. Without that wisdom, you cannot become Buddha. That wisdom, not wisdom thinking wisdom, that wisdom, we need the ideas as part of our journey. The real journey happens through meditation, without any doubt. If the real journey, the meditation, was like an airplane, then you've got to get to the airport. You need whatever. You need a taxi, a train, a bus. Perhaps you need all 3 of them. Maybe you need a taxi to the bus station, and a bus to the train station, and a train to the airport station. And without those, you're never going to get on the plane. The plane's not going to stop off in your house and land in your garden. You've got to get to the place where the plane can take off. It needs a runway, it needs everything. An airport is. You've got to get there. So we need the best possible thinking as a basis for best possible meditation. And this is what we are looking at. We need to see thinking and the difference between right thought and erroneous thought. Let's not call it wrong, that's more like a value judgment, but erroneous. So that's a point we need to know when we are studying about not getting too caught up in the ideas. Then another thing we need to know, because today we're going to start on the middle way, is that there was a huge difference between Indians and Tibetans. Huge. So, of course, we are stereotyping whole nations over thousands of years. Shouldn't really do that, but there's such a truth in it. We have in India, how many was it, 1600 years of Dharma? No records by the Indians themselves, or if there was, they're all gone. They were so busy doing it, living it in their own way, and the way they wrote Dharma is so poetic. It's songs, it's poetry, and of course condensed poetic versions of what the Buddha taught. When you read the sutras, it looks like the Buddha sat down and taught in condensed poetry, but he taught people in ways that made sense to them. It took weeks, months, but then what he taught was condensed down so people could learn it by heart, the essential points. So that's how the Indians were. It's very kind of, yes, let's say poetic. Tibetans want things 1, 2, 3 in a grid, organized, each thing in its place. So when the Tibetans took the Indian texts, they added what are called sabje in Tibetan, indexes, organizations. So they'll take a text and they'll say, this text is in 5 parts, and then the first of the 5 is in 20 subsections, and then we're in the first subsection, which is in 3 parts itself, and then these couple of words mean this. They unpack everything, and it's all so like this. So today we're going to start looking at the middle way school, madhyamaka, and the way the Tibetans looked back and saw it was as schools, trends. But when we do our modern research and we look back at India, these weren't schools. They didn't have their own monasteries. There was no conflict. There were different styles. But when we look back and we say, there were the Cittamatra, there were the Vaibhashikas, there were the Cittamatrans, and then the middle way. In the middle way, there were 2 main trends and so on. We need to be aware that this is the way the Tibetans analyze it, very usefully, because by boiling it down to the essentials, they can say, these ones thought this, and these ones thought that. But in practice, from all we can gather these days, it was much more vague in India. A beautiful vagueness. People didn't mind being in the same monastery, sharing the same room with somebody who thought very differently. And when you see, for instance, one of our great 7-point mind training teachers, like Atisha, and you look at his three main gurus. So he's the one, he's teaching us 7-point mind training. It's the essence of the Bodhisattva way, the way to Buddhahood. One of his teachers, he was a Sautantrika. So you think, what? Sautantrika? Ooh, they're the Shravakas. That's the Hinayana. How comes he was his guru? What's going on? You know, because we look back and we put things in boxes. And they weren't so boxed in India. It's a beautiful sort of seeking the truth, accepting your fellow beings, respecting their views, but nevertheless trying to find and refine what the truth is. So this is our journey through the ideas. Now already I spent in my own program for this course one whole extra session on the Cittamatrans than I intended to, but I still want to say some things about them briefly this morning so we can move on. It's more to remind you of something that was said last time, but also to refresh us about Cittamatrans, because once we've understood a bit about madhyamaka, we're going to look at what madhyamaka finds wrong with Cittamatran thinking. So it's good that we have their thinking in our mind, and in particular, their thinking about shunyata, emptiness, voidness. So remember, shunyata always means what's wrong. Shunyata is, we had the definition, excellent definition. Shunyata is wisdom. Wisdom that knows the difference between what seems to be and what really is. So, what seems to be, the Shunyata teachings always point out there's something wrong there. It's not like that. At the risk of confusing you and being a tiny bit off topic of going through these schools systematically, I want to take an example of what we're talking about. You see, there is what seems to be is called conventional truth. Truth. In Tibetan, is called the truth about what's completely false. It's called kunsop dempa. Dempa, the truth about what is kun, completely. Tsop means fake. It's the word for a mask. You know, when people do mask dances or they wear a mask. What is completely fake? But it's the truth about what's completely fake, because that fake reality is conventionally, between people, accepted as true. So I want to give you a simple example, not from the classic philosophy, just from modern science. It's one that works for me. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but maybe it will help. And it's the example of a yellow wall. Okay, so let's say somewhere in this world, there's a big yellow wall. And so I can go there, I can give you directions, you can go there, and we'll all look at it and we'll say, that's a yellow wall. And we can write it down in a book and people can take photos, they can put them all over Instagram of that famous yellow wall, wherever it is. Conventional, shared reality. And it makes sense. Like if I want to send you to a cafe, I say, you go to the big yellow wall, right? Everyone knows where that is. There are signs all over the city, the yellow wall. And then once you get there, then you turn right. There's this little cafe, they do an excellent whatever. I can use it to give you directions. It's conventional, accepted reality. It works. Relatively, it works. It makes sense. It's functional. Remember when we did the Sautantrikas, their thing about mind and matter was function. It works. That's what it does in our world, in our common perceived reality. A yellow wall. So now we're all standing. Let's all go and stand in front of that yellow wall and look at it with philosopher's eyes. The wall is not yellow. Now, I'll give you an example first, okay? If there's a wall, different wall, not our yellow wall, right? And I throw a tennis ball at it, and it bounces off, and I say, catch, and you catch it. What did you catch? A ball, didn't you? I've got a ball, I throw it, boom, rebound, you caught a ball. So there's this thing called light from the sun, and what you are seeing when you look at the wall is light that bounced off it. Like the tennis ball bounces off a wall, light from the sun bounced off that wall. The wall gobbled up some of the spectrum, right? It absorbs part of the sunlight, but what bounces off comes to our eye. You are not seeing a wall, you are seeing light. You are seeing sunlight that bounced off. You are not seeing a wall. That's fairly obvious, isn't it? Except we don't think like that. When we go there, we are looking at a wall. We're not standing in front of it and thinking, I'm seeing reflected sunlight. We don't think of it like that unless you know physics and maybe you're into light, and then you realize you are not seeing a wall. So that's the real truth of the matter. The truth of the matter. And it's okay that we say a yellow wall. You know, a nitpicking Buddhist could come along and say, oh, it's not a yellow wall. It's a wall that absorbs the light in such a way that your eye picks up the yellow part of the spectrum reflected from the sun. And of course, if it's nighttime, the street lights are blue, then we'll see a green wall, because what's reflected off. But the wall isn't green. Our eyes are receiving bounced off light. Same when you look at a tree. Remember our exercise of going and looking at a tree. You are not seeing a tree. You are seeing reflected light. What is the tree that's reflecting that light? Oh, it's a wonderful mystery. But for us it works. We can say it's a tree with green leaves that turn gold in the autumn and so on. It works. It's working reality. So it's called conventional truth. It is our truth. It's the truth that we're in. And then when you get deeper into that, like going to a next level of truth, then that's true. But then each person will perceive that yellow wall according to their own eyes and brain and all the rest of it. And then humans can't check their experience one against another's to see, is my yellow the same as your yellow? All we can do is say yellow, and the other person will say, yep, yellow. But then I've met people and we look at things and I say that's blue, and somebody says, no, it's not, it's green. And there's no way out of it, because you can't get inside their head and their brain and their visual cortex to experience what they're experiencing. So we can go to another level of truth and another one. So what we're looking at is ultimate truth. when you go deeper and deeper and deeper, in the end, ultima means in the end. What's the truth? Now, this could just be philosophy for the sake of it, but it's not. It's not. It's so vital because we are looking for the ultimate truth, the deepest truth, the highest truth about, well, about what? If it's Cittamatra, mind. Everything's mind. Everything's mind. Everything. So what's the ultimate truth of this mind? If you're not Cittamatra and you're not saying everything is mind, then it's the ultimate truth of everything, the universe. Look at it another way, because our only way of accessing truth is by working with our own mind, our own stream of consciousness at the beginning. Then it's the truth of ourselves. We're trying to find our own deepest truth, our own self, the search for ultimately what or who we really are. In other religions, it's the search for God. And when you really dig into all of that, God, the universe, truth of me, the truth of mind, so many ways of expressing it. Why are people bothered? Because we want to know what's going on. What the hell is going on? Why am I me and you? And why is a bombs dropping here and flowers growing there? Some people living a hell of a life, some people living a hell of a heaven of a life. Is there a God up there doing this? Now, ultimately, as deep as you can get, what's behind it? Buddha teaches karma. Other people, nihilists, say there's nothing behind it. It's just like that. People make war. Because of that, other people suffer. Full stop. Don't look for any deeper reason behind it. There isn't one. That's just the way things happen. Thorns are sharp and butter is soft. It's just the way they are. It's the way life is. It's life. And so on. That's why. And that is very, very important for us. It's what humans, once they get beyond, the basic things of living, surviving, eating, building a nest, building a home, and so on, then because we have this wonderful ability to know, to think, and to have profound experience, life-changing experience, then we want to know in the end, how far can you go? How deep does it get? What are the mysteries behind all these things that are happening to us? Is very, very important. So we shouldn't get too locked up in the sort of philosophical details. We should remember that these wonderful minds of the great teachers of these traditions were really trying to understand the Buddha's intention, Gompa, when he gave his teachings in terms of ultimate truth in the end. What is the truth of the truth, as well as the truth of our conventional, deluded reality? So now, when we go back to Cittamatra, if you remember from last time, everything is mind. And mind has 3 dimensions to it every moment for us. Maybe not later on, further on down the path, but for us, every moment mind has 3 aspects, 3 dimensions. One is what's generated through past karma. which is giving us an experience of the world we're in. People, places, events happening around us, to us, that we can't change very much. That was called the conditioned. It's interdependent reality, conditioned, cause and effect. The second aspect was the way we relate to what our karma is making happen to us each moment. The way we tell ourselves the story about it, how we use it, how we relate to it. That's called the imagined. It's our projections, our interpretation. And then, third thing is ultimate reality, the ultimate truth, the true truth. So within Cittamatra, we did this last time, there are two ways of understanding number 3, ultimate reality. First one is if we take away all of the imagined, projected stuff, the way we're relating to the present moment, brought on screen by past karma, we can take that all away, shut it up, keep it quiet. Then there is just the present moment brought on screen by karma. Now, many of you will have had this as a profound experience of living in the moment. All of a sudden, life is very vivid. There's the sights, the sound, the experience. And you're not doing anything because you're being mindful, mindfully aware. And you see how vivid the present moment is, and it just is. It comes and it goes. And of course, there's a lot of beautiful Buddhist poetry. They're great at that in China, Japan. These things, the moment can be a bird sings, a raindrop falls, a third line, equally poetic. That's it. And sometimes the third line can be, that's it. There isn't some ultimate reality. It's in this moment. Only this moment is real. So that's one Cittamatra way of defining ultimate reality. You take away number 2, the imagined, and the ultimate reality, the shunyata, is realizing the shunyata, the illusion created, the non-validity of all the projections that we were bringing to that present moment. And so the karmic movie on screen just now, without any interaction and projection, becomes the basis for ultimate reality. That's one, I'm putting it very simply, it's much more subtle, but anyway, very simply. That's one way. The other Cittamatran way is to say that both the karmic movie and our interrelation with it in this present moment, the projection, the interpretation, and so on, both of those are conventional reality, and they are nothing to do with the timeless, changeless peace of mind. So ultimate reality is the timeless, changeless peace of mind. Once you start looking at those two, they become less divergent and the difference is more subtle. We don't have time. And you may need weeks of observation and meditation to do that. But there's quite a big difference. Now, what happens with the Cittamatran, remember where Cittamatran mainly started as a stream of thought, was with Asanga and Vasubandhu. So we're about 4th, 5th century, around there. Asanga was also the one who gave us Buddha nature teachings. Buddha nature. So in the second of those two ways of defining ultimate reality, then ultimate reality is beyond the karmic projection, the karma and the projections onto it, and it's the changeless Buddha nature for some. So the Buddha nature teachings are merged with the Cittamatra teachings, so that the nature of mind is not just peace, beyond the karmic projection, because Buddha exhausted his karma, beyond the karma, Buddha exhausted the karma, beyond the projection, Buddha had got rid of that a long time before getting rid of the karma. So there's peace. But with the Buddha nature teachings, it's not just peace. There are all the Buddha qualities of wisdom and compassion. So there is a Cittamatra Buddha nature fusion. They don't call it Buddha nature. The actual word is Tathagata-garbha. 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 Okay. Tathagata-garbha. Tathagata is a word for the Buddha. Tata means that. Gata means became. The one who became that, because it's beyond all words. He became that. Tathagata, Buddha. Garbha means essence of the Buddha. So Tathagata-garbha. So we get Cittamatra Tathagata-garbha fusion, where that second mind-only way of understanding ultimate reality is absolutely combined with Buddha nature teachings. This becomes very important as a basis for tantric practices afterwards. Okay, so let's leave our Cittamatrans there. And now today we move on to, we use the Sanskrit term, madhyamaka. In Tibetan it's uma. U means middle, center. So madhyamaka, madhya means middle, maka, magga means way, middle way teachings. So the middle way was taught really from time of Buddha onwards. And it's the way that avoids all the extremes. So in the Buddha's own teachings, one of the Buddha's top 10, top 8 disciples was somebody called Kataya Yana. 2 long A's and 2 short A's. Kataya Yana. Kataya Yana. Or Katyayana. So in one of the sutras he gave to Katyayana, which is also in the Pali canon, as well as in the Mahayana canon, then Buddha teaches the middle way also to his main disciple Kashyapa. So let's start with what he teaches Kashyapa. Now this is from a Mahayana sutra. It's from the Heap of Jewels, but nevertheless it's from the Buddha. Kashyapa. What is the correct way for bodhisattvas to approach phenomena? It is this. It is the middle way, the correct, discerning appreciation of phenomena. Kashyapa, what is this middle way, which is the proper discerning appreciation of phenomena? Oh, that's one to have tattooed. The proper discerning appreciation of phenomena. Oh, phenomena. What does he mean? What are phenomena? What manifests to us as conventional reality in all of its glorious details. What is the middle way that does that? Kashyapa. Permanence makes one extreme. Impermanence makes the second extreme. Whatever lies between these two extremes cannot be analyzed. It cannot be analyzed. I can't analyze it, you can't analyze it. The most brilliant brain and mind of our time could not analyze it. It cannot be analyzed. What the hell are we doing here, studying all this stuff? It can't be analyzed. It cannot be shown. Even the Buddha cannot show it to you. It is not apparent and is totally unknowable. We might need to come back to that word, unknowable. Kashyapa, this is the middle way, which is the correct discerning appreciation of phenomena. Kashyapa, self is one extreme. No self is the second extreme. Whatever lies between these two extremes cannot be analyzed, cannot be shown, is not apparent, and is totally unknowable. Kashyapa, that is the middle way. Kashyapa, samsara is one extreme. Nirvana is another extreme. Whatever lies between these two extremes cannot be analyzed, cannot be shown, is not apparent, and is totally unknowable. So the Buddha sets the basis for the middle way thinking, which in great minds trying to understand the Buddha's intention gradually teased out into the madhyamaka philosophy. It started, or let's say that the teasing out really took a huge quantum leap forward with the Prajnaparamita sutras, the various ones that appeared in the first centuries of our era. And then with Nagarjuna, who summed up the meaning of the Prajnaparamita sutras, we have really the beginning of madhyamaka as a school of thought. A school of thought as opposed to a tradition, as in Tibet, where you have different traditions with different monasteries and different leaders. Here we're looking at trends of thought in India. So Nagarjuna really, with his thinking, with his works, like the root verses of the middle way and so on, he really set it going. And then his thought was developed by his disciple Ayadeva. So they're developing this idea from the Buddha. In the teachings the Buddha gave that are in the, not the Bodhisattva scriptures, but in all of the scriptures, the Pali Canon, the Mahayana scriptures, so it's the teachings to, it's called the Katyayana Gotra Sutra. In that one, it says, this world, Katyayana, for the most part depends on duality, upon the notion of existence and the notion of non-existence. But for one who sees the origin of the world as it really is, with correct wisdom, there is no notion of non-existence in regard to the world. And we'll come back to it. And for one who sees the cessation of the world as it really is, with correct wisdom, there is no notion of existence in regard to the world. So this is 2.5 more thousand years ago, Buddha teaching everyone. Most of our thinking is based on existence or non-existence. God exists, mind exists, I exists, karma exists. This is. That's it. It is. We develop ideas of what is and their isness. And then there's what isn't, what doesn't exist. And especially in terms of our own well-being. There is no happiness in that. No blood inside the stones, and so on. Notions of what's unavailable, what's not there, what doesn't exist. I said the world works on this. Now, in particular, for the key questions, is there a God who made all of this, creator God or not? Some people think there is, some people think there isn't. At the time of Buddha, people had very powerful ideas of God or a range of gods and so on. Or for mind, is there such a thing as mind that exists or doesn't exist, or me? Me. All my life I've been me. I've never been you. All my life I've been Ken. So I've got a very good reason to believe I exist. No one else went through what I went through. No one else. No human, no dog, no cat. It was me in conventional reality. So we might well wonder, who am I? And then if Buddha says, you've been going on for hundreds, thousands of lifetimes, what's been going on? And when I die, what's going to go on to the next life? Even if it's very different. It's very reasonable to ask these questions about exists or doesn't exist. There's no God, or there is God. There is the divine, or there is something behind all this, or there isn't. So then he says, for somebody who understands correctly the coming into being of things, the creation, how, whatever it is we're talking about, how things come into being, then knowing how things come into being, you cannot believe in non-existence, because you know properly, unerringly, with correct cognition, how things are created. And if things are created and they exist, well, then they exist. You can't say it doesn't exist if you know properly, as Buddha does. And then he says, and if you know how things end, how things, he talks about cessation. And of course, all of us scholars and so on are wondering, what exactly did he mean by cessation in that case? But anyway, if you know how things end, then you can't believe that things exist. With the meaning of that word exist, as it was in India and in Tibetan. Something to exist, it means it exists all by itself, independently. It has its own existence. Its existence, like that yellow wall, you remember? Yellow wall. Not yellow. And the wall bit's a bit more complicated to get into, but it's the light that's yellow. It's not the wall that's yellow, it's the light that's yellow. So if one knows that when the sun goes down and it's pitch black, the wall's not yellow anymore. If you know the end of the yellow, then you can't say that that wall is yellow, because it would be yellow even in total darkness, because it is yellow. But it's not. It's a very deep quotation he gives to Katyayana, but it sets the ground for what do we mean by middle way. It's not the middle way that he taught as the basic Shravaka teachings of not the extreme of hedonism or asceticism. We've got that anyway, that's basic to the Buddha's teaching. But now we're looking at the extremes of exists and doesn't exist. And the middle way avoids them. It's not halfway in between, where something half exists and half doesn't exist. That would be very tricky. It doesn't mean middle like that. It means middle, like I'm thinking of a big ball with a disc on top and somebody's balancing, right? If you go a bit that way, whoops, your disc will slide off. If you go a bit that way, you'll slide off. You go a bit forward, you go a bit back. You stay in the middle, you've not fallen off. For Buddhists, following the Buddha's middle way, falling off is getting caught by ideas, where you take your ideas for truth. So it's a bit like the Cittamatrans, this what we project onto reality and taking that for truth. But we're not talking that, we're just talking about ideas. Now this is very, very important. I want to, before we go into the details of madhyamaka more, I want to look at, we've got our Mahayana teachings are those two, Cittamatran, madhyamaka. We don't have any more. They're mainly those two ways. Both of them, with their different styles, their different arguments, are there to help us go beyond thinking, to transcend the conceptual level and to reach a non-conceptual wisdom, to go beyond conceptual wisdom, if we call it that, correct knowing, correct thinking, to go beyond that to the wisdom that transcends thinking. We will never become Buddha without doing that. When you look at what is called the Noble Eightfold Path, it actually means the Eightfold Path of Arya, realized beings, noble beings. And when you look at right thought, they don't need it. It's not for them. Is they need to know how people think so that they can express Dharma in people's reality, use the right words, the right terms to talk to you and you and you in ways that make sense to you because of the way your mind ticks. That's right thought. They don't need thought. Don't need thought. If you do, the Shravaka path and you learn shamatha for peace, thoughts are distractions. If you do the Bodhisattva path, you need to go beyond ideas to the direct experience of Buddha mind, Bodhisattva levels. So we need to go beyond thought. Now this is bad news for a lot of people, especially bright people. And the brighter you are, the more off-putting it is, because you're used to sorting things out, working them through, being cleverer than most people around you, brighter, sharper, quicker. And there's Buddha saying, this cannot be shown, cannot be thought. It is unknowable, meaning unknowable by the five aggregates. Within the five aggregates, our consciousness, our cognition, those things which are part of our samsaric mind stream, the stream of consciousness. The middle way cannot be known by that. So like I said earlier, of course, you should have switched off by now. You should have said, what the hell am I doing here then? Listening to Ken, going blah, blah, blah. If it cannot be shown, it cannot be described, and so on. It's because we need to work with ourselves, who we are. We're a thinking machine. We think all the time. So we need to get our thoughts in order. We need to get rid of harmful thoughts. And as much as we can think, we need to take our thinking in the right direction. Until we can go beyond it. So we have correct thinking and incorrect thinking. They're described like two wooden sticks. We start off with incorrect thinking, mainly. We use the Buddha's teaching, which is correct thinking, like these teachings we're doing now, and the two rub together, and they rub together, and then it catches fire, and in the end there's no sticks left at all. The incorrect thinking's gone, the correct thinking's not needed anymore, and we've got a nice warm fire of a different sort of wisdom that comes from the source, that comes from the truth, the deep inner truth of ourselves. It's the ultimate truth of ourselves, of the universe. It's in the end. That's the truth. So I wanted to, excuse me while I sort of dig in my messed up papers. I've got two quotes. Well, one of them I just did. It's the one to Kasyapa, which says, it cannot be analyzed, cannot be shown, is not apparent. So here's the two quotes, sorry. One is from Vasubandhu. So Vasubandhu, now we're back with the Cittamatrans, Vasubandhu and the Sangha brothers, who really gave rise to the Cittamatran tradition. Vasubandhu says, Shunyata, emptiness, voidness. Shunyata does not mean that things have no intrinsic nature. It means that this nature is inexpressible, and only to be apprehended by a kind of cognition that transcends the subject-object duality. So he's saying that shunyata, all the teachings on shunyata in the Cittamatra tradition are not there to take us to some empty, nothing there state. It's to show us how to get rid of our delusions and in the end to discover something which is beyond duality and beyond dualistic thinking and dualistic perception. That's why this logic is there. So the shunyata, the emptiness, is there for that reason, to take us beyond thought. And then if we look now at Chandrakirti, who comes quite late on in the madhyamaka, middle way tradition, he says, therefore, emptiness is taught in order to completely pacify all discursiveness without exception. There's no right, blah, blah, blah. All discursiveness means thinking, talking, expression, philosophy. Emptiness is taught not to take us to some kind of empty, blank space. He says it's not for that. He's replying, Chandrakirti is replying to a criticism that you middle way people are like nihilists, because you're pointing out all the delusions in the end. You will say, this is empty, that's empty, this is shunyata, that's shunyata. And he says, no, we're not trying to make people think everything is empty, useless, nothing there. We want to help them go beyond the power of thought. It's not so much go beyond thought as to go beyond the power of thought. So then the middle way, it avoids saying is. It avoids saying isn't. So you could just shut up and go silent and then practice a lot of shamatha and let your mind go silent. Would you get it? Not really. Not really. It's not about that. It's because in order for us to go beyond is and isn't, we don't need to study philosophy. We do to get the basic idea, but we need to know ourselves and see in our own mind how we make things. Akron Rimsky used to say, make things solid. Make people solid. And I think, I can't live without you. I can't live without you. You've made somebody so solid and vital. Before you knew them, you managed quite well. Maybe once they've been gone a few years, you manage quite well. But we make them so solid, and we make the picture of me, I can't exist without it. You know, when people sometimes get ill, they lose a vital function, a vital organ. And they think, I'd rather die. I can't live without this, but they get used to it. And they find they can live in a different way. So we explore all of our way our mind solidifies reality, projects onto reality, tells a story, has a narrative about me and a narrative about you, a narrative about me and a narrative about the universe, about life, about the way it works. And we look into all of that and we free it up. We free it up. And meditation is absolutely vital for this. You can't just sit down and think your way through all this. You need the depth, the quietness, the different relationship with your mind that comes through meditation. So the middle way explores existence and non-existence. And as the middle way, it's trying to avoid those two. It goes a little bit further, and not because it wants to, but because in the philosophies around at the time of Buddha and at the time of Buddhism and at the time of middle way philosophy, not the first 10 centuries of this era, then there were other schools of thought in India, beautiful schools of thought, not Buddhist, but they had a lot going for them, like the Samkhyas, wonderful analysis of life and the universe and how things are, how things work. And so in this quest for truth and in the debates with other traditions where everyone's trying to get to the bottom of the matter, what's going on, then there were some philosophies that marry is and isn't, exists and doesn't exist. To put it in stupid everyday language, is when somebody says, well, it kind of is, but isn't, you know, he kind of, it doesn't make sense to a computer, but it makes sense to humans talking, you know. It kind of It exists, but at the same time it doesn't exist. All right? Oh yeah, gotcha. Understood. There are some philosophies that say that, well, like God doesn't exist in as much as you can say, it's that blue, pink, round, lives there, where you can take somebody to meet God, but that the divine influence is everywhere and created everything and is present every moment. Christians think like that. Nobody's offering you a SpaceX trip to God, up in heaven. But that God created all of this somehow. God's present every moment. Kind of. So where is God? You show me, take me. You can't. So exist but doesn't exist. That kind of thinking. And then there's a fourth one, which is tricky thinking. It's neither existence nor non-existence. Something else, whatever that else could be. So these are the four extremes. When the middle way avoids two extremes, it's existence and non-existence. When it avoids four extremes, it's existence, non-existence, both exists and doesn't exist, that's number 3, and neither exists or doesn't exist, that's number 4. And so the middle way philosophy, as found in the Prajnaparamita Sutras and as beautifully developed by Nagarjuna, challenges those 4. Now, today, what will we do? We've got a tiny bit of time left. An introduction to the 2 main thinkings inside middle way philosophy. So we'll come back to them next time when we look more closely at the 2 proponents, 2 main proponents. But just generally, let's look at the 2 main trends. One is called prasangika, and these follow the, what can we call them? I call them the no teachings, the no teachings, where of Prajnaparamita, of Nagarjuna, where they show fallacies, inconsistencies in other people's arguments. Full stop. So when people have ideas, which say God exists, or the universe exists, or we've got Prakrit, Purush, this huge potential to manifest anything in the universe exists, and then so on, then the prasangikas look at their arguments, and they're very much like, although some of you may not have seen this, but on American TV there was a series some time back of a detective called Columbo. I don't know if any of you saw Columbo. He always wore this same kind of tatty-looking raincoat, and he didn't look too bright, but he had this way of saying, just a minute. You're saying this? But didn't I hear you saying that? And he solves mysteries like this because he sees, he thinks about it. There's some really nice, they use him now for the internet memes of American politics and the election, where he looks into what somebody said here and he said, just a moment. You say you don't know this woman. but then, and so on. So they use him. So this kind of, you don't state your own philosophical position. You don't have one, you don't hold one. But you show other people what's wrong with theirs, how it doesn't work, or it falls short, or it's inadequate. So Nagarjuna's teaching and Prajnaparamita teaching is very much shunyata, in the real meaning of shunyata, which points out the illusions, what seems to be there, what seems to be the yellow wall. But what isn't, because the wall isn't yellow, the light's yellow. What seems to be points out the fallacy where people go wrong and delude themselves. So to help people find the truth, you show them what's wrong with however far they've got, whichever way they're thinking. But you stop there. And when they say, well, what do you think? You're not saying it because the Buddha said it cannot be expressed, it cannot be known, it cannot be shown. Whatever we're talking about, the universe, mind, the divine, it cannot be. So this middle way. So they follow that very strictly. They're called prasangikas. And then what disagrees with that are called svatantrika. Sva means own, tantra means thread. They've got their own thread. They say it's not really right to do that to people. You need to be able to say, well, when they say, well, what do you believe? Then they say that all relative reality is illusion because of interdependence. So what we'll look at when we go further into this is the complete fusion of shunyata and interdependence. When you say empty, when you say void, when you say shunyata doesn't exist, it's because of interdependence. And it's summed up in this other tattoo, this very, very important saying. Nothing exists in its own right, all by itself, in its own right, all by itself. Because everything depends on other things to be what it is. Depends on. Everything is interdependent. Everything is interdependent. So, because everything depends on other things, nothing has its own existence in a vacuum, where all by itself it can be what it is. A yellow wall, for instance. It can only be yellow in sunlight. It can only be yellow when eyes look at it, because without eyes there's no color anyway. And so on. So they say, as far as relative truth is concerned, then everything is interdependent. There is no lasting God. There is no lasting mind. There is no lasting self. And so on. Because everything is interdependent and changing, impermanent, interdependent, lacking individual self. These three great Buddhist statements. Everything is interdependent, everything is impermanent, everything lacks own self, as far as relative reality is concerned. Ultimate reality is beyond thought, cannot be expressed. But they do have a line, they show interdependence. They also use logic and investigation to show how other views are wrong, but they have their own party line, which is interdependence. These are the two main trends, with lots of coming and going and fine-tuning of those arguments. But the Svatantrika, they have their own stance, philosophical stance, which is interdependence. The Prasangika just refute. To take the Prasangika one step further, then when somebody asks them, well then, what's your view then? Because you've destroyed our views and you see this is wrong, that's wrong. So what's your view? And then no answer. No answer. So then you say, well then your view is to have no view. And then they'd say, well, you're saying that, but I'm not saying it. They don't have a view, which is to have no view, because if your view is to have no view, then you have a view of having no view. So if somebody says to them, you don't have your own view, then you'd say, well, you're saying that, but I'm not saying that. These are frustrating people. These are really, really frustrating philosophers. And then because they've really not just learned Nagarjuna's philosophy, but they have thought about it, used it, applied it. They're just so clever at seeing the contradictions that we have in our mind. So it's so useful for us, because all of this is for our own awakening. It helps us see the contradictions in ourselves. And I know in me, there's so many, so many. So this gets interesting. And it's like even in beautiful statements in Vajrayana or Mahamudra, you say like, all is appearance and emptiness. Sounds good. But then, if you were a prasangika, you might say, appearance and emptiness. What's this emptiness you're talking about? You know, it sounds like fish and chips. You've got fish and you've got chips. Or you've got, they say, two threads wound together. Two threads, two things. Appearance and emptiness. But it's the emptiness of appearance. So then what does shunyata mean? It means that appearance isn't what it seems to be. That's its emptiness. It's inbuilt. It's not what it seems to be. There isn't emptiness like space. You put a bit of emptiness together with a bit of appearance, and you've got the movie. You've got a bit of spaciousness, a bit of whatever emptiness means in the way some people misunderstand it. The emptiness is wisdom. It's always shunyata is wisdom. So there is appearance, which isn't what it seems to be. And the knowing what it really is, which tells you why it's not what it seems to be, why the wall isn't yellow, that's wisdom. It happens at the same time. A wise person sees a yellow wall, they know a yellow light. So, but the prasangikas, it's very useful to get into prasangika mode. It's not, how can you say, it's not the most comfortable shoes to walk the path in, because you'll find fault with everything. And that might make you a nasty piece of Buddhist work. You might you might lose your kindness, which will be terrible. But it's good to really get into that mode of thought where you just stop and stop and stop and stop again to see what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and to realize the difference between the way it seems and is this really so? What's going on? Where are your contradictions? Where are your different conflicts inside yourself? And so on. So anyway, we'll come back to those next time. So just to conclude this morning, and we'll come back to that perhaps next time, is so the middle way started with Nagarjuna more than a century before Vasubandhu and Asanga and Chittamatrans. But once they were both in India and debating with each other, then what does madhyamaka, all of them, include, with the prasangika type of mind, find wrong? And it's this, and I'll leave you with this to think about till next week. Okay. Mind. Mind only, or all is mind. On a conventional level, it makes so much sense. And I know, not so much these days, but in like the 80s, Samiling, you get the mind pundits. You go past a conversation in a corridor with one person who's been a Buddhist for a few more years than somebody else, sort of giving a quick corridor teaching about Dharma. And they'd say, the mind does this, the mind does that, and the mind, this actor, which is the mind, and it makes so much sense. Your mind gets angry. Your mind becomes peaceful. You focus your mind on this. We couldn't do without that word. How could we do Buddhist teachings without the word mind? I don't think we could. So, middle ways say, this mind you're talking about all the time. Everything's mind. The mind has these three aspects. There's the karma-generated mind, there's the imagined mind, there's the true nature of mind. What are you talking about? What is this mind? Can you show us? Can you tell us what this mind is that's doing this? And because you're talking about it all the time, like people talk about God. God's doing this to me. God is everywhere. God made the little flowers and the birds. They're talking about God all the time, but they can't show you God. You're talking about mind all the time. Mind does this, mind does that. What on earth is this mind you're talking about? It makes no sense to us. It's like an invisible friend. Like my invisible friend here. You see him? That's my mind. What is it? You're all the time talking about mind and you can't define it, you can't tell us what it is, you can't justify it, prove it. There's not one bit. Buddha never saw it. It makes no sense. Sorry, it doesn't work. If you can show us anything that is this mind you're talking about, then we'll listen to you. But when you use this mind, it's everything. And then, beside that, if mind is everything, really everything, then the word mind doesn't need to exist. We've got the word everything. If we say, look, crystal, where are we? And telephone. They're different things. So we can talk about a crystal because a crystal is everything it is, and telephone's everything it is. It makes sense. Things are different. But when this mind is everything, from a banana to a crystal to a telephone to a thought to a mind which is totally quiet and is nothing at all, the word mind makes no more sense. It's not something as opposed, it's everything. Well, we've got a word for everything, it's everything. Every different thing. So unless there's something, a mind that you can show us, then it makes no sense at all. It's just a word for everything. or like other people say, the universe or God. So this is the middle way's contention with the Cittamatra, and it's a wonderful thing for us to think about, because in Mahamudra practice, in the Mahamudra prayer, then we have so many verses about what is this mind. And we're looking for it. And in our Mahamudra practice, we are looking for this mind everywhere. It's every moment in our real practice. Good luck. So now we do our dedication prayer. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained by the main enemy, mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become free from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom is not arisen. May its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Okay, thank you very much for listening so patiently. And your turn now, if you've got any comments or something you'd like to add or question you'd like to ask.
You've got us all mind boggled.
Well, it may be an earlier lunch today. We can knock off for lunch earlier.
Thanks very much, Ken. It's amazing teachings, honestly. It's just mind-blowing, absolutely.
Don't blow it all, though. Keep a little bit for thinking.
I keep some. Oh, yes.
At this stage, we're thinking.
Yeah.
We are primarily thinking about it. It always makes me think of long jump, where people have to really run, boom, 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 build up speed before the actual leap. So before the leap into beyond thought, non-conceptual, we need to do quite a bit of boom, 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 boom with the conceptual work and get our thinking mind sort of clear.
Well, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, I was wondering if I could just make a comment.
Please,
Can you hear me? Yeah, I was just thinking how unfortunate in some ways the verb to be is. Like when as soon as you say, like, say, for example, you say, oh, life is flux, or, things are impermanent, the very fact that we're using the verb is somehow is a solidification of it conceptually. And I was just thinking, reflecting when you were talking, like how somehow fundamentally, so how problematic it is, like just that verb.
Yes, it's amazing when
And,
we learn a language and learn verbs, like to be, to have, to go, to love. Some of the first the main words in a language, they're such powerful things. But the Prajnaparamita teachings and then Nagarjuna's summary of them is it's cataclysmic for some Buddhists, because he does this exactly this kind of thinking, like the way our mind works, which reflects in language, because language is the mirror of the actual way our minds work. And this is the equivalence, the putting things together that way. Life is impermanent or whatever. It's cataclysmic for Buddhists because his prasangika type thinking, he's not prasangika, but that type of thinking, which ruthlessly explores what's going on in our mind to see, is it valid or not? Is this really true, the way we think? It applies also to Buddhist thinking. So in like the root verses of the Middle Way, Nagarjuna, got 27 chapters, and the fundamentals of the basic Buddhist teaching, like cause and effect, so much is cause and effect can't possibly exist. I mean, that's it's huge. It's kind of a huge deal, and time can't exist. In Buddhist teachings, it's so much in terms of so many eons, so many kalpas, and time, and so on. So he really, it's that mind that just stops and says, just wait a moment. Oh, just a moment. It's that Columbo mind. It's kind of, what? This isn't right. So, yeah.
And I also wanted to mention you sent that document, which I have not had time to look at in enough detail weeks ago, about where physics and quantum physics and that kind of thing
Yes,
has its
yes.
overlaps. Well, there's another one by Carlo Rovelli. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'll send it to you. A book by Carlo Rovelli. He's also a quantum physicist. He wrote a book called Helgoland, and he writes in there about Nagarjuna and how the answer has been there all this time. He's like saying, we've been looking for something all this time, looking for this something as physicists, and and it's just not about a thing. And it's very, very nice the way he describes it. So I'll send that to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate it. Physics, modern physics is just incredible, because some of the best minds in there, they've got to this point, driven to it by their own experimentation. It's not that they've become philosophers because they were interested in philosophizing. They've just done exactly that. They've stopped and looking at, what are we doing here? What are we as humans bringing to what we're measuring? And what we're measuring, and we're saying it is, so it is out there, when we're really looking at what we mean is what it is for us as people who see, feel, experience life as we do, and how are we doing that? And then in the first place, what paradigms are we bringing to this? And it's like people who do experiments because they want to reach a certain conclusion, like you get a lot of in various industries these days, like the pharmaceutical industry and so on, where you finance a whole university department to find the answers you want, basically. The paradigms, the thinking that we bring, there's thousands of years have gone into making this scientific mind that wants to understand things in its own terms. So people think about this, and it's kind of beautiful. And what's amazing is that going way, way back, before we had these tools of modern science to look into space, to look into the atom and so on, then minds that meditated, how can you say, saw like a microscope, saw into space and knew things through the powers innate to mind. That's just incredible.
And I've got quite a messy question.
Sorry?
I've got a bit of
Oh,
a
Jenny,
messy question.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So it feels like there's I definitely feel the appearance of like a separateness between me and other people. Like even that I can like the yellow wall is like a shared reality that's external, but like only I can experience my thoughts, like, or there's something that's knowing the thoughts coming and going, and like I guess like I'm wondering what, like, even though I can't find the me in the scanders or separate from the scanders, then like what is it that is the, like, why are we having this appearance? And what's like, yeah, sorry, that's a bit messy, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, to carry on the thread that was I took up after the previous question, maybe there's something interesting in the question why itself. Why do we ask the question why, and what do we expect as an answer to why? And in fact, the Buddha's teaching isn't so big on whys. It's hows. It's how it is now. How did that come about? What caused it? How it is that we have what we call a stream of consciousness. The reason we call it a stream of consciousness is because it is separate from somebody else's stream of consciousness. But why it's like that, there aren't really why answers going on very much. We look much more into how it is, how it works, how it came about, and how we can get out of it if we believe, the Buddha's pathway. And once you get out, or you get to a stage of out, not all the way out because that's Buddha, but once you've got to a significant escape from your own stream of consciousness, especially through shamatha meditation and getting some of what they call the siddhis, the accomplishments that come through shamatha, then we start to experience less separateness. There's what people at first would call telepathy, where you are much more sensitive to another mind stream. And sometimes when people get quite opened up, even more, you get quite affected by other people's mind streams. There we need to learn to sort of, how can you say, safeguard ourselves from too much sensitivity to other people. But it becomes, but there's still not an answer to the why until we get to quite a level of stability when just the isness of everything happening takes away the questions why, I think, rather than answers them.
I think that's what I was wondering, is like the separateness that I feel or experience, like, would that go at some point?
Yes.
It sounds like it will. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. And all of our beautiful bodhisattva journeys, learning how to do that wisely, lovingly, compassionately, including love and compassion for ourselves, because we eventually become, there's less and less you, and there's more and more of everyone, and you are the service component for life. You're the help. You don't have an own agenda, an own life. You are there as a servant. I was thinking about this a lot lately, because sometime in October, about the, I forget, 10th, 15th, I'm taking part in, I'll advertise it, there's going to be a symposium about Akon Rinpoche's life. There'll be 5 people talking about his vision, and I'm one of them. And I was thinking about him and how he lived his life. So when he was taken away from home, from his parents, about the age of 5, he was recognized at the age of 2, left with his parents for a couple of years. But they said, we'll be back to take him. So he had a couple of years of parents, and then was taken totally to the monastery. And they told him, as a 5-year-old boy, you belong to everyone now. We bought you from your parents. Because they give a sum of compensation to the parents. And they say, now you belong to everybody, and your life is to serve them. Then all of his bodhisattva teachings. And he really believed it. It was the amazing thing. Like people like me, you, I imagine, we're making this transition from a lot of me and completely inside ourselves to being more there for other people, more given. But from the beginning, he was told, and he believed, and he lived his life as though he was there as a servant for everybody, not with his own agenda. It's quite marvelous. So I'm basing my talk mainly on that, but there will be less and less, that's the way it goes, less and less me, more and more of 2 things, more and more Buddha nature, more and more everyone in their own world and helping them. Oh, the Buddha nature is not an own agenda, it's what's behind everything. It's the true nature of our mind, and it's who we really are. And it's, yeah. Neil, were you about to ask something earlier on?
As always. Well, I have a comment and a question in a way. There were 2 very useful examples that you used. The yellow wall, which everybody's mentioned. The other one for me today was your description of balancing on a disc on a ball.
Yeah.
As a opposite to thinking that middle means sort of halfway between this and between that. I think that's very useful, because like if you're balancing on the ball, you can't move forward, sideways, this way, backwards or forwards. That was a very good example, I think. I appreciate that.
Oh, good.
My question really relates to what you've just said. Khenpo Tsultrim made the point that it's important to see, like if you're Shravaka or middle way, mind only, or madhyamaka, that to understand where they're coming from and how it's useful to them in their situation. And you also mentioned that in India, people weren't sort of divided up. They lived together, whether they're Shravaka or what's mentioned Akon Rinpoche. And I know, like when he started Samyeling, it wasn't sort of, in quotes, a Kaju center. He brought teachers from all traditions, ones who he thought were the best to teach that particular aspect. So my question is, do you think it's a shame that, and I may be wrong, but I think that the vast majority of Buddhist centers, at least in the Western world now, are very, for want of a better word, compartmentalized. that they don't do what Akon Rinpoche was doing in Samyeling. You get sort of one set of traditions or teachings.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a difference between a mega center like Samyeling, and especially in the early days, there was a reason that he had Theravada teachers, Zen teachers, teachers from all the Tibetan traditions coming there. It was very much to do with the times we were in. I think there's good points and bad points. It is, I think, quite, how can you say, very widely acknowledged that to follow a Buddhist path, you need to follow one path, and that once you're trying to follow two paths at the same time, or even two teachers within the same path at the same time, it can get complicated because they won't give the same advice. They're not robots. I mean, a Kagyu Lama is not produced by a factory, and they each have their own way, their own style, and whereas going with either of two teachers might be perfectly great for you, you can't go with both at the same time. So the fact that a center has one lineage, so it's teaching one method where you get the empowerments, you get the practice instructions, and they're the same, that they're consistent, that the teachers who come teach within that system, and they're not bringing in another philosophical aspect, another practice aspect that's confusing. There's a lot to be said for that. But I think once you've realized that that's the practical reality of it, because centers, they can't afford to bring lots and lots of different teachers, like a really big center could, then it's very important to stress to people within centers to be broad-minded and respectful for the other traditions, and which Akon Rinpoche was doing all the time. But in Tibet, there are wonderful places like Serta Monastery, the one that with the huge number of buildings and the 15,000 monastics there in Tibet itself. And there they have all the traditions. They're very welcome. And then Akon Rinpoche helped Khenpo Dawa in Yushu make a tulku school where tulkus and masters from all four main traditions, in fact all five if you include Bonpo, came to be with each other to learn, and also to learn how to keep a monastery alive within the Chinese system, because you have to, fill up the forms and obey certain rules, otherwise your monastery is shut down. So how to survive, but keep it. But that place is wonderful. At one point, it was quite a shock. Akon Rinpoche suddenly suggested I should go and spend a year there in Tibet, and so I was a bit close to it, and with the founder, Khenpo Damcho, the most wonderful Lama who oversees all of that. But it's so nice to have all these Geluk Lamas, Kagyu Lamas, Nyingmapas together, respectful, learning each other's traditions a little bit, and at the same time respecting their own. And I think in India there was a lot of that, in these great centers like Nalanda, Vikramashila. They welcomed this multiplicity of thought. It was a richness. It's like a restaurant where you've got wonderful choice of food, and that they could learn from each other, and not afraid to debate and talk, not debating to fight for your side, but debating with an intention of being ready to acknowledge that your own mind's limited and you can move on. I think that's wonderful. But Tibetan history is complicated from that point of view, and there were geographical reasons, political reasons why the sectarianism became more than it ought to have been, and why Tibetans themselves had this huge respect for the lamas who went beyond sectarian and tried to, see beyond, see ourselves as a wealth of families. Okay,
Thank you.
well, thank you all very much, and take good care of yourselves. We come together next week for this same topic before we have our monthly weekend off with Tomlin. So, bye-bye, everybody.
Yes, Ken.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Very much, Ken. Draw now. Draw.
Thank
So much.
Thank you very
you.
much, Ken. Thank you so much.